Zach again, newtotorah.com, coming in making a video for you today. Have you ever heard someone who's talking to you about Torah who doesn't understand why you keep it or why you observe it or why you're even learning it, and they're a Christian, they're coming from it with the Christian perspective, and they say that God only commands us to keep two commandments. Number one, love God with all your heart, and number two, love your neighbor as yourself. Have you ever gotten that thrown at you? I have a lot, and I know a lot of people have too. And that's one of the arguments that you see coming from people who just don't understand. They've never researched the Torah, they've never researched the commandments that God gives, and they don't even know what Torah is, but they read that in Matthew, and all they think is all they have to do is love God and love their neighbor, and everything else is fine. Let's read the verse. Matthew 22:35. Then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him, and saying, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? Yeshua said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments, now this is the verse they usually don't read, on these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Because usually when I'm looking at this, when people have come to me, it says right here, and the second, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, full stop. And they don't go into that last verse, that verse in verse 40. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Because here's the deal, folks. If you go back through the Torah, which is the law, and you read the law and you read the prophets, you will find that all throughout the Torah, the Father says, keep my commandments, observe my statutes, my judgments, all of my decrees you will observe and do. And if you do, you're blessed. If you don't, you're going to be cursed. And then you have, after the Torah is given, Deuteronomy, the Hebrews go into the land, and they start messing up. They start worshiping idols. They start doing all these things. And from then on, the rest of the Bible, until you reach the New Testament, is about the prophets and people, likened to the judges and all these people and all the writings coming and saying, turn back to the Torah, turn back to the commandments. Because when you look at the commandments, all of the commandments given by God, the decrees, the statutes, the judgments, they all fall into those two categories. Love God with all of your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. Every single commandment that you read in your Torah, whether there's, people like to count whether there's 613 commandments or not, whatever. Every single one of those that you can find in your Torah, in your Bible, falls under one of those two categories. It's very simple. You're either loving God with all your heart, mind, and soul, or you're loving your neighbor as yourself. Oh, well, Zach, what does bacon have to do with loving God? Well, probably because God says not to do it. And if you love God, you won't do it. It's the same way a parent tells a child or instructs a child in which to live, in a way in which to live. And if the child disobeys, is the child really showing the love to that parent in that disobedience, in that rebellion? Because if the father, come on. You've got to be a complete moron to not look up and know that pork is not healthy for you. There's so many studies out now today. The Consumer Report study I posted on my channel a while back, there's so many studies. Pork is not healthy. And there's a reason why the Father said don't eat it. Okay, and I've done videos before. I'll post them again above. Why Acts 10, Peter's vision is not about eating pork chops or ham sandwiches, or catfish fillets. It was about people. Not to get on a whole nother rabbit trail. But when the Father says to his children, do this, it will bring you life and life more abundantly. If you don't do it, you're going to be cursed. And I want you to be blessed. I want you to have life more abundantly. Every single one of those commandments falls under those two categories. Loving God or loving your neighbor as yourself. Exodus 21 verse 16. And he that steals a man and sells him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. What's going on in this verse? It's slave trading. It's someone who takes another human being and sells him as a slave. And the Father does not like, I know there's lots of people out there like, but the Bible condones slave ownership. You're reading it wrong. I've done videos on that as well. But it's very clear right here. He that steals a man and sells him, or if he be found in his hand after he stole him, he shall surely be put to death. Why? Because the person who goes out and steals a man and then tries to sell him to another human being as if he's just a piece of property, that's not loving your neighbor as yourself. That's why when you look at with God's Torah and God's commandments, all of these commandments can hang on the two. Love God, love your neighbor. They fit into those two categories. That's why Yeshua says what he says in Matthew chapter 22. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Because all the law and the prophets are about loving God and loving your neighbor. It's that simple. All right, go home, read your Bible. Thanks.